Let's go read this story. Genesis chapter 32. All I did so far was read you a question because I just wanted to introduce Jacob. Is he not rightfully named Jacob? Well, you bet he is. Look at all the stuff, all right? Now that we know he's rightfully named Jacob, let's go to his encounter in Genesis 32. And here's how I'd like to do this. I want to read the entire encounter. It's not that long. And then we're going to go back and we're going to work through some of the things that happen in this encounter, because my goal tonight is to help you begin the process of peace with yourself. I said the process because I'm going to be up front with you. There is no way you're going to wrestle out the self tonight. That's not the way it works. But you get the equipment. And we're also going to show you how, because this is necessary, and I want to say this up front, we're also going to show you how it's necessary to see how Jesus confronts the self so that you're equipped in a way that's beyond psychology or self-help or the principles of the gurus of the world. What does the Bible say about my confrontation with self? And listen, most of you in this room are older than me. You have more miles down the road than I do. I don't presume to be able to tell anyone in this room how to wrestle with themselves. You could probably tell me a lot of things about wrestling with myself. So it's not advice or self-help. It's an examination of a biblical character that speaks beyond all of us. And it's an individualistic story so that the principles apply across the map, but you're the individual. So you got to insert yourself into the story and find out what you do in that moment and in that hour. And also for the many people that watch, the thousands of people that watch, some of which don't have a single clue about facing off with their self, that badly need to hear this. And so you're helping facilitate that tonight for a lot of people, I think, that will need this lesson in the middle of a real world situation, for whatever that situation might be. Let's watch Jacob. Genesis 32:22. And he arose that night, and he took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and he crossed over the ford of Jabbok. He took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And just as he crossed over Peniel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. And that's the by and large, the story of the wrestling that Jacob encounters. We often call this Jacob wrestling with God. We're not wrong, because the very word Israel means he who wrestles with or contends with El. El is the Hebrew word for God. He who wrestles or contends with God. But I want you to go back to verse 24, because I think there are 3 crucial things that happen in verse 24. If I were to break this down into 3 easy little remembrances in one verse, this is the foundation, this is the starting block for what wrestling looks like according to the biblical story. Jacob in verse 24, number 1 is left alone. Number 2 wrestles a man. And number 3 does so until the break of the day. Now we'll go back through those, but I want you to notice those 3. Jacob's by himself. Jacob wrestles a man. Jacob wrestles until the breaking of the day. 3 simple little principles that have a lot to do with peace on the inside. And the first thing we have to realize is that when we really go to war with who we are, it's not a war with our neighbor. It's not a war with our spouse. It's not a war with our kids. It's not a war with our pastor or our church. It's a war with us. We're alone. There are things that have to be dealt with us alone, not corporate, not societally, not in group speak. It's easy to hide in the group. It's easy to hide underneath labels and banners and communities. But when you really come down to the self, you're the one that lies awake in the middle of the night staring at the ceiling, not the group. Which is why the true wrestling always happens on the individual basis, and it always finds you when you're alone. It always finds you when you're by yourself, when you're lonely, when you're tired, when everybody else has walked away. And you might fault everyone from walking away and leaving you alone. But it's only when you're finally alone can you really go to war with the stuff that really, really matters. So don't shrink away from being alone. Realize that when the real battle starts, it's going to have to start with you. If Christ came to die for us, there is an element to alone we have to face. Because we love to say stuff like this: He would have died if it were just me. Ultimate statement of alone. You're not wrong. If you believe by faith in the redemptive story, then that has to be right. He would have died if it was just me. Here's what we miss. As far as God was concerned, it was just you. Because God doesn't save in the collective. God doesn't save just based upon gender or race or class or denomination. He's moving on an individual basis. He's speaking to the real you. You and Him, all by yourself. You and Him. It doesn't exclude community. It doesn't exclude church. You need people, and that becomes really obvious the moment you cut yourself off from all of them. If you ever don't think you need them, just give that a whirl for a while, and you'll find that John Donne was right. No man is an island. You just don't make it by yourself. Eventually you need at least someone to yell at. If nothing else, it just feels good to just let someone have it. Someone's got to be in my life. But when it comes to the battle of the self, it's going to happen alone. It's going to happen in that moment when it's just you, because all the other dependencies have been stripped away. And so allow that to happen. Allow it to get down to just you, and realizing that this is a great admission that we have to have, is that I am often my own worst enemy. People say to me, "What do you think the devil looks like?" And I say, look at yourself in the mirror during your worst moment. And that is what the devil looks like, because you'll do a great job of doing the work of the enemy given the opportunity. Because you'll do everything you can to bite and devour your neighbor. You'll do everything you can to cut your own meaning and your own joy off. You'll do more damage to yourself than any spiritual powers of darkness could ever do. And so just accept the fact that you're going to have to face this stripped away of everything else. The beauty of this, the beauty of that place of alone, goes back to the simplicity of the faith of peace with God. Because if we truly believe peace with God, we realize that when we get alone with ourself, the only person left in the room is the Spirit of the Lord. And He's only truth. He doesn't know how to lie to you about you, and He doesn't quarter you lying to you about you. And so He expects to hear the truth, because that which is in the dark is brought to the light. And so deal with you in the place of alone, because that's the essential part. But